I'm Charlotte, 24 years old, living in a quiet suburban town just outside Seattle. People often tell me that passion and reality must coexist, that they must balance each other. But for me, passion was the only thread that kept me tethered to something resembling a dream. It was the force that pulled me away from the stifling reality of a family that never understood or valued the things I cherished. I've been in love with gaming since I was a little girl, too small to even see the screen. But watching my cousin play was like watching magic unfold. When I realized that computers weren't just for entertainment, but could be the bridge to endless opportunities, I knew I had to build something for myself. No one else was going to do it. Not in this house. For 3 years, I balanced college with every odd job I could find. Mornings as a library assistant on minimum wage evenings, spent freelancing on a sluggish old laptop that barely managed to keep up with my ambition. Every birthday, every holiday, while others wished for clothes or vacations, I quietly asked for gift cards for cash, anything that could get me closer to my goal. Most didn't get it. They couldn't understand why I'd turn down parties or forgo those luxury purchases just to get my hands on a graphics card. But that card wasn't just a piece of hardware, it was the heart of my dream. A custom-built PC. It cost me $2,800, every part carefully chosen, every screw turned by hand, every penny saved with an obsessive precision. I don't brag about it, but the day it powered on silent, powerful humming with potential, it felt like every sleepless night had been worth it. It wasn't just a computer. It was my foundation. Proof that I didn't have to abandon my dreams to please anyone who thought they knew better. My freelance career took off. No more 200 side gigs. I started landing recurring clients, designing banners for local brands. It wasn't about getting rich. It was about doing something that mattered, about proving to myself that I could survive without anyone else's help. In a family that poured all its expectations into my younger sister Lauren, the golden child, I had to quietly carve out my own path just to prove that I was worth something. Lauren, 3 years younger, was always in the spotlight, effortlessly gliding through life, while I worked, and worked. She had red carpets rolled out for her, while I built my foundation in the shadows. I lost count of how many times my parents used Lauren as an excuse to take away what I needed. Every time I wanted to take a course or advance my skills, they'd find a reason to delay. Lauren needs money for her fashion school, my mom would say. You'll have to wait. The next year, it was Lauren needs funds for her New York internship. And my dreams were delayed again indefinitely, while Lauren's dreams bloomed nurtured like a prized bonsai. I don't hate Lauren. I hate how favoritism became an unspoken rule in our house. Dad would say, "You're the older sister. You should know how to give in." That word, give in, sounded noble in theory, but in our house it meant giving up anything I wanted just to keep Lauren happy. I still remember my 20th birthday. I wasn't asking for anything extravagant, just a quiet family dinner at my favorite pizza place. But that day, Lauren had accidentally booked a spa appointment at the same time. My parents canceled the dinner without hesitation. It wouldn't be meaningful without Lauren, they said. I smiled, congratulated her, and then quietly bought myself a small cake. I spent the evening alone with an old movie like I always did. At first it bothered me, but over time I stopped being surprised. And yet deep inside, a small, stubborn part of me always wished just once that my parents would truly see me. Not as Lauren's shadow, but as someone with a voice, with dreams of her own. Recently, Lauren started an internship in Los Angeles. My parents emptied their savings to rent her an apartment near downtown, one that matched her style. When Mom told me about the Italian silk sofa and the walnut dining table they'd furnished for her, I just pressed my lips together. Meanwhile, my desk was so old that every time I typed too hard, the drawer would slide open on its own, as if it too had a life of its own. One evening, as I wrapped up a client's design project, I heard a soft knock at my door. It was Mom. Her eyes were hesitant, her voice carrying the practiced calm that never seemed to reach her gaze. "Charlotte," she began, "Lauren asked me to talk to you. She needs to borrow your computer for a while. It's urgent. She's rendering a video in Los Angeles, but her machine isn't powerful enough." I stared at her, and for a moment the weight of it all settled into my bones. Every choice, every sacrifice had led me here. I froze, my fingers hovering above the keyboard, unsure if I had heard her right. "Are you talking about the PC I spent 3 years saving for?" I tried to breathe, tried to stay calm. But the words barely left my mouth before my mom spoke again, as if it were nothing more than a small request. "Well, you still have your laptop, right? Your sister really needs it. You're just doing small design stuff, so the laptop should be fine for now." My heart pounded in my chest. The anger was bubbling up, threatening to spill over. Did she even realize how heavy design software ran on my laptop? That computer wasn't a toy, it was my livelihood. It wasn't just something I used. It was my work tool, the foundation of everything I had built. "Charlotte," Mom said, her voice so casual it made my skin crawl. "Lauren has more opportunities. She's building her future while you're still living here freelancing. You should be flexible. Know how to sacrifice for the family." Sacrifice. That word meant to sound noble, twisted in my gut like a knife. Sacrifice for the family, or sacrifice so Lauren could keep living in her fantasy where everything belonged to her. I said nothing more. But that night, I sat in front of my computer, fingers grazing its edges like they were afraid to let go. It wasn't just a machine. It was proof of everything I'd fought for. And I knew without a doubt that this wasn't about borrowing it for a day. It was just another step in their ongoing game, taking what they could, as long as it meant Lauren got what she wanted. The next day, I walked into my room ready to relax after finishing the final design for a regular client. I had planned to power up my PC, play a few games with friends, a small reward after a long, exhausting week. But when I walked through the door, I froze. The desk was empty. My beloved monitor, keyboard, even the gaming chair I had saved for months, gone. The silence in the room was suffocating. I stood motionless, my mind racing with a dozen possibilities. Maybe it was a robbery, but the windows were shut. Everything else in place, except for my computer. I rushed downstairs, panic rising in my chest. My parents were sitting at the dining table sipping tea as if nothing had happened. Mom glanced up at me, her eyes giving nothing away, the same practiced indifference I had grown used to. Dad was flipping through a furniture catalog, disturbingly calm. "Where's my computer?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Oh, we sold it?" Mom said, her tone so casual as if I'd asked about an old iron they gave to a neighbor. I couldn't believe my ears. "Mom, say that again." "Sold," what Dad sighed, setting the catalog down with a quiet finality. Lauren needed money urgently for her graduation exhibition. We discussed it as a family. That computer was just sitting there for games and small projects. While Lauren is building her future, we had to prioritize what matters more. I stood frozen, my entire body numb. Do you have any idea how long it took me to save for that computer? I worked from morning till midnight, every dollar I had gone into building it one part at a time. It wasn't a toy. It was my work. It was everything. "Charlotte, you're overreacting." Mom frowned. "It's just a computer. You still have your old laptop. You can manage. For now." For now. I clenched my fists, the anger and hurt rising like a wave in my throat. "Did you even ask me? Or was it that whenever Lauren frowns, the whole world must step aside, Dad?" I said, my voice shaking. "We're family." family means sacrificing for each other. Yeah, I snapped sacrificing for Lauren again, right? She never has to give up anything. The words burst out, years of frustration finally cracking the surface. The sound of heels echoed in the hallway. Lauren strolled in, holding a brand new dress, a smug smile plastered across her face as she gleefully posted her picture online. "Oh, you're back," she said with that familiar air of superiority. "Thanks, by the way." She added, her tone flat. "Mom said your computer sold for more than expected." What a lucky break, right? I stared at her, my hands shaking. Lucky? She was standing on my hard work, and she had the audacity to call it lucky. Lucky, I repeated the word, tasting bitter in my mouth. "You're standing on my back and you call it lucky?" Lauren shrugged, unconcerned. "Come on, Charlotte. It's just a computer. You're so good at what you do. You'll build another one soon enough. I can't afford to miss this opportunity." Opportunity? I scoffed. "So, I'm supposed to throw away 3 years of savings just so you can look pretty on stage?" Mom cut in, her voice sharp. "That's enough, Charlotte. Stop being selfish. You're the older sister. You should think about your sibling. Lauren's success is the family's pride. Why can't you understand that I looked at them all at Mom?" Dad, Lauren feeling an overwhelming sense of detachment. They weren't even looking at me. They were looking at what I could give, what they could take. In that moment, it hit me hard. In my parents' eyes, my value wasn't what I had accomplished. It was only what they could cash in. Whenever Lauren needed something, no apology, no remorse. Just the assumption that, of course, they'd take from me to give to her. Lauren casually turned away, her voice still full of plans for the upcoming event, the kind of plans that seemed to occupy every waking thought of hers. My parents, oblivious to the storm that had just passed through our small kitchen, sipped their tea as if nothing had happened. It was almost as if I had become invisible again, just another shadow in the room. But this time, there was no comfort in that silence. I used to think of this house as home, but now it felt like a cage. A place where my efforts were invisible, where my value was measured by what I could give up. And that night, as sleep stubbornly eluded me, a single thought echoed in my mind. This won't end quietly. The anger simmered, but it wasn't what kept me awake. No, it was the clarity that had settled like ice in my veins. I couldn't keep waiting for decency from people who had grown so comfortable trampling over my efforts. If I stayed silent this time, it would be the same thing again and again, wrapped in the polished excuse of family. No more. I pushed the covers off and got out of bed. My old laptop powered up slowly, the screen flickering to life in a way that almost mocked me. 30 seconds. 30 seconds to boot up, but I didn't care. Tonight, I would do what I should have done long ago. I dug through old folders, pulling out receipts for every single component, every part I had painstakingly saved for. Photos of the build process documenting every hour, every dollar spent. Even the records from the freelance gigs, the projects that paid for the graphics card, the processor, the cooling fans, every single piece of evidence that this computer wasn't just a machine. It was my work, my dream, and it was now gone. By 1:00 a.m., the entire story was laid out before me. The proof, undeniable. I exhaled slowly. This was no longer about reclaiming a machine. This was about reclaiming my dignity. My right to exist on my own terms. The next morning, as the family gathered for breakfast, I waited. Dad with his newspaper. Mom distracted by her phone. Lauren preening before a mirror, lost in her own world. None of them spared me a glance. But today, I wouldn't be invisible. "I want to talk," I said, my voice cutting through the stillness. The room went quiet. Dad looked up first, his face twisting in irritation. "How long do you plan to make a scene?" I placed the stack of papers on the table with deliberate force. It wasn't a scene, I told myself. It was the truth, something they had been ignoring for far too long. "This isn't about making a scene, Dad," I said, my voice calm but unshakable. "This is about fairness and legality." Mom's forced smile faltered. "Charlotte, are you seriously turning this into a big deal? We're family. Family doesn't nitpick like outsiders." "Outsiders?" I let out a sharp laugh. "Outsiders. You sold my personal property like it was an old chair just because Lauren wanted to shine at some exhibition. No permission. No discussion. So tell me who's really treating me like an outsider here." Dad growled, his tone low, dangerous. "You live under this roof. Everything here belongs to the family." I lifted my head, locking eyes with him. "Wrong. These are invoices showing I paid for every part with my own money. This is proof of my freelance income. The money I earned through that PC." I pushed the final document toward him, the transaction that showed where my computer had been sold to a stranger for $200. Lauren flicked her hand dismissively, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "You're making such a fuss over a few bucks. It's pathetic." I turned to her, meeting her gaze with a calm resolve. "It's not about a few bucks, Lauren. It's about hard work, about the value of labor. But you wouldn't understand that, would you? You've lived your whole life off other people's sacrifices and then have the nerve to call it privilege." Dad slammed his hand on the table, the force of it making the teacups tremble. "Enough. What do you want? Speak clearly." I didn't blink. "Very simple. You will return to me $200 in cash by the end of this week. If not, I will proceed with filing a claim for misappropriation of personal property. And if you want to go to court, I have all the evidence." Mom's face turned pale, glancing nervously at Dad, clearly flustered. "Charlotte, do you really want to sue your own parents?" I gave her a cold smile, one that was not kind. "I want you to look me in the eye and understand something. I'm no longer the child you can bully into submission. I don't live for anyone's false pride." Lauren crossed her arms, her tone dripping with disdain. "You're tearing this family apart, Charlotte." I smiled calmly, the words coming out with icy clarity. "No, Lauren. This family has been broken for a long time. I'm just making sure I don't get dragged down with it." The kitchen fell into a heavy silence. I could feel their discomfort, the way they were used to giving orders to me, quietly accepting. But not this time. This time, I had the power of truth on my side, and I wasn't going to let them take it from me again. "Pay," Dad muttered, his voice dropping as he swallowed his anger. But then, in a quiet tone laced with a thin veneer of authority, he added, "But from now on, don't expect any help from this family." I didn't flinch. I looked him straight in the eye, my resolve unwavering. "I've never received any help from you." I stood up, gathered the stack of documents, and walked away from the table. For the first time in years, there was a subtle lightness in my step. This was just the first step, but for the first time in my life, I felt like I had reclaimed my voice. I thought that after that confrontation, things might settle down. But I severely underestimated my parents' pride and their stubbornness. For the next week, the air in the house was suffocating. Dad said nothing, but his eyes followed me cold, like I was both a traitor and a disgrace. His gaze was heavy, as if my existence had somehow betrayed everything he thought I should be. Mom, however, was less subtle. She kept repeating, "You've broken my heart, Charlotte," every few minutes punctuated with long, exhausting sighs that filled the house with passive-aggressive guilt. It was her way of playing the martyr, making me feel like I was the one at fault. But it didn't move me anymore. And Lauren, she was unfazed. She strutted around posting pictures of her new dress fittings and exhibition preparations on social media, all with captions like, "Grateful for my supportive family." I could only laugh bitterly. Everything I worked for, every ounce of effort, was now neatly packaged under the label of silent sacrifice, as if I should be proud of being exploited. I wasn't waiting for an apology anymore. What I wanted, what I needed, was to reclaim what was mine. That Friday afternoon when I got home, Mom called me over. She was holding a thick envelope, and Dad was sitting at the table, his face a stone mask. "This is your money," Mom said flatly. "Exactly $1,200. We're giving it back to you as you demanded." I stared at the envelope for a moment, not reaching for it right away. I wanted to engrave this moment in my memory. The first time my parents were forced to pay the price for their contempt for me. "Thank you," I said, keeping my voice steady, not betraying the storm inside me. Dad set his jaw. "Everything in this house belongs to us, from these walls to that table. If you want something to be yours, you'll have to build it yourself." I nodded, keeping my composure. "That's exactly what I'm doing, Dad." With the envelope in hand, I turned and walked away, leaving behind their angry, helpless stares. Maybe in that fleeting moment, they realized I was no longer the easily bullied Charlotte. But I didn't care if they did. Later that evening, I reached out to the person who had bought my PC. Fortunately, he was a decent man, or at least fair. "I kept the machine in perfect condition," he said over the phone. "Honestly, when I got it for that price, something felt off. Now that I know I get it, you want it back, right?" "For exactly $1,200, I replied firmly. "All right. I don't intend to profit from someone else's misfortune," he said. We arranged to meet at a small cafe downtown. When I placed the cash on the table, he slid my familiar PC tower back to me, carefully packed in its old box. As my hand touched the cold metal casing, it felt like I was reclaiming a piece of my dignity. Not because of its monetary value, but because it symbolized the persistence and effort that had been so carelessly trampled. When I brought the PC back, my parents saw it, but neither said a word. Lauren passed by with a disdainful glance, muttering, "You really know how to put on a show." I didn't bother to respond. That night, I powered up the machine. The hum of the cooling fans was as smooth as if nothing had ever happened. The screen lit up familiar applications, loading one by one, like they were welcoming me back to myself. But deep down, I knew this story wasn't over. My family wouldn't change just because they returned the money once. They hadn't learned a thing. For the first time, I began seriously considering walking away. Getting my PC back should have made me feel lighter, but the suffocating air in this house never really left. Every scrutinizing glance from Mom, every cold sigh from Dad, and every time Lauren deliberately ignored me felt like tiny knives, quiet but cutting deep. I realized it wasn't the computer I needed to reclaim. It was my space, my right to live, to breathe in an environment that respected my worth. That night, I opened my laptop and typed studio apartments for rent in Seattle. I wasn't rich. I didn't have extra savings, but I still had my skills, my work ethic, and most importantly, my self-respect. I would rather live in a cramped room of my own than survive in a house that treated me as a backup sacrifice. It was time to start a new chapter. After nearly 3 hours of scrolling through countless listings, I finally paused at a small studio on Maple Avenue. Barely 30 square meters with white walls and old wooden floors, but clean. Most importantly, the rent was within my reach, something I could manage with my freelance work. I called the landlord that very night. Doris, a widow in her 60s, answered with a warm yet firm voice. "This place is small, young lady, no balcony either," she said, a hint of sympathy in her words. "I don't need a balcony, ma'am. I just need a place to start over." There was a pause. She agreed to meet me the next morning. After the call, I opened my client list, sending out emails for collaborations, updating my portfolio on freelance platforms, and posting job offers in design community groups. I wasn't waiting for miracles. Freedom, I knew, came at a price, and I would have to pay it myself. At the same time, I scheduled a comeback for my streaming channel. Streaming had always been a joy for me, a way to connect with people who genuinely appreciated what I did. Now it was also a potential income source, something to help cover the upcoming expenses. In the following days, I quietly planned my move, making small trips at a time, pretending to reorganize my room to avoid Mom's prying eyes. Each night, after the house had fallen asleep, I quietly moved boxes to Emily's place. She had always stood by me, a constant source of support. "Are you sure about this, Charlotte?" Emily asked, her voice filled with concern as I carried another box into her living room. "Handling everything alone won't be easy." "I know," I said, setting down the box, "but I'd rather be tired from living true to myself than comfortable in a gilded cage." Emily didn't say more. During the day, I buried myself in design work, and at night I streamed. Though my viewership was still small, it was enough to feel their support for the first time in a long while. I felt like I was walking my own path, difficult but honest, and mine. As for my family, nothing changed. Mom began noticing the empty spaces on shelves, the missing items from my room, but she never asked. Dad, as usual, flipped through his newspaper, acting as if I no longer existed. Occasionally, he threw me mocking glances, but I no longer cared. My silence was no longer submission. It was a declaration, one that they wouldn't understand, that their opinions held no weight over me anymore. That weekend, I signed the lease. Holding the keys in my hand felt like cutting an invisible chain that had bound me for years. The apartment was small, but every corner, every window was mine. No one else had the right to decide for me anymore. The night before moving out, I left a small note on the dining table. "Thank you for teaching me the value of myself. I won't trouble this family any longer." I didn't expect them to stop me or feel regret. Silence would be their answer. When I left that house, no one saw me to the door. I thought for a brief moment I had escaped their orbit, but people like my mother and Lauren didn't accept losing control easily. They didn't lash out openly. Instead, their attacks were subtle, insidious. I realized this when one day my email kept alerting me to failed login attempts. My freelance platform account was nearly locked due to continuous reset attempts. Fortunately, I noticed in time and enabled two-factor authentication. At first, I thought it was a bot hacker, but when I traced the unfamiliar IP address back to my old neighborhood, everything became disturbingly clear. My family couldn't stand the fact that I left without their permission. To them, my silence was a public insult. This was their way of retaliating silent sabotage, hoping I'd crawl back to beg for forgiveness. But I didn't confront them. That's exactly what they wanted me, losing my temper. I wouldn't give them that privilege. Instead, I worked harder. My design projects gained momentum. A small company in Portland even offered a long-term collaboration. My stream channel, though still modest, was steadily growing. These people didn't care whose daughter I was. They cared about what I could do. One afternoon, while shopping at the supermarket, I ran into Mrs. Peterson, one of my mom's former co-workers. She recognized me from afar and called out warmly, "Charlotte, how have you been? I heard you've moved out on your own. Your mother keeps complaining at work." I stood there frozen for a moment before I forced a smile. "I'm doing fine, thank you." I smiled politely, but Mrs. Peterson wasn't the type to stop there. "You know your parents are really stressed these days. They're scrambling to manage everything because of Lauren. That exhibition drained a ton of money from them. Someone said they even mortgaged the land out in the suburbs." My heart skipped a beat. That piece of land was supposed to be my father's retirement safety net. I had always thought that if things ever got tough, at least our family would have that fallback. But now, It had been burned away on some fleeting pursuit of Lauren's star potential. And of course, no one had told me. I'm just telling you this so you understand. Don't be too quick to criticize. Mrs. Peterson added, her tone dripping with the sympathy I didn't want or need. Your mother's always been so proud that Lauren has star potential, but shining is expensive. You know, she said with a wistful smile. And in the end, it's always the family who pays the price. That sentence echoed in my mind all the way home. I didn't feel satisfied by the confirmation. It was cold chilling. My parents would rather gamble away their future than admit they were wrong about me. I wasn't just a sacrifice in their eyes. I was invisible. That night, I received a message from Lauren. It wasn't her usual cheap sarcasm or veiled insults. This time, it was a screenshot of a maxed-out credit card bill with a casual question attached. Can you give us a hand? After all, it's a family matter. The phrase, give us a hand, struck me like a slap. It was so condescending, as if I were an emergency ATM expected to dispense cash whenever they needed it. I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded the bill straight into the family group chat, adding only one sentence. This is the consequence of indulging greed and pride. Don't expect me to pay for choices I was never given. That was it. No long explanations. No drawn-out scolding. Just the cold, hard truth. The silence that followed lasted longer than I expected. The entire next day passed without a single message from Mom, Dad, or Lauren. They weren't used to me setting such clear boundaries. And for the first time in years, I felt the weight of control not over them, but over myself. I wasn't the one standing there waiting to be accepted anymore. I knew that message would hit their egos like a slap, and I also knew they wouldn't stay quiet for long. 3 days later, my phone rang. It wasn't Mom. It wasn't Lauren. It was Dad. I let it ring until it stopped. A minute later, my screen flashed. 3 missed calls. Then came a flood of texts, each one more forceful than the last. What childish game are you playing? Family is a place to return to, not something to disrespect like this. If you still have any shred of decency, come back and fix your mistake. I sat still, watching each line appear, feeling no inclination to respond. What surprised me most was Lauren jumping in. You think you're so special, huh? The world isn't going to roll out a red carpet for stubborn brats like you. You'll come crawling back eventually. You just don't see it yet. They still didn't understand. It wasn't that I didn't know how to bow my head. It was that this time I chose not to. That evening, as the messages kept pouring in, I decided to do what I should have done long ago. I typed a single message and sent it to the family group chat. I'm not coming back. I've spent years trying to be respected, trying to be heard, but all I ever got in return was being trampled and manipulated. Family isn't supposed to measure love by blind sacrifice for one person. If you want to cling to the image of a good daughter, Charlotte no longer exists. Stop contacting me. This is my final request. I hit send and waited. Not long after my phone vibrated. A message from Mom. You're destroying this family. Charlotte, one day, when you fail out there, you'll realize only family accepts you. But when that time comes, don't expect this house to welcome you back. I read every word feeling like I was listening to the same tired song they'd been singing for years. But this time, it didn't sting. I felt relieved. So light, in fact, that even I was surprised. No more anger. No more hope to be understood. Just a sense of peace. Knowing I had finally drawn a clear boundary, I opened my contacts. My finger tapped once on Mom, once on Dad, once on Lauren. 3 simple taps. But to me, it felt like 3 chains had just been cut. I sat quietly in my small apartment, soft light streaming through the window, casting gentle patterns on the old wooden floor. No noise, no tears, just the quiet peace of someone who had taken back control of her own life. That evening, I turned on my PC, getting ready for my usual live stream. But instead of jumping straight into gaming, I paused. I took a few minutes to talk to my viewers about the decision I had made today. No long-winded explanations, no complaints. Just the story of someone learning to cut off toxic control disguised as family. The response from my viewers surprised me. Words of encouragement, shared experiences, and stories from others flooded in, making me realize I wasn't alone in this quiet battle. For the first time, I felt a genuine connection, not through blood, but through empathy, from people who understood that love should never mean possession. When the stream ended, I shut down the PC and leaned back in my chair. Out there, my parents' and Lauren's lives would go on the same way, trapped in cycles of pride illusion and blind indulgence. But as for me, I had turned a new page. A chapter where I no longer lived to please anyone, no longer needed to prove my worth to those who refused to see it. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but at least now I had the right to choose my own path. I don't remember the exact moment I truly let go of my expectations from my family. It wasn't a big shock, not a final insult. It was a quiet process, so subtle that even I didn't notice. I had stopped waiting. I only knew that one day, when the silence from my phone no longer made my chest tighten, I had truly stepped out of their shadow. And from that moment, I started living a different life, not a new life. It had always been mine, but now I was allowed to claim it. My freelance work slowly found its rhythm. The first clients returned, bringing friends and colleagues. A small studio in Tacoma even offered me a long-term collaboration to design their new brand identity. My income wasn't stable yet, but every dollar earned through my skills and effort felt more rewarding than any allowance I had ever received. At the same time, my stream unexpectedly caught the attention of a small indie gaming community. I wasn't a famous streamer, nor was I flashy or gimmicky. My persistence, honesty, and willingness to share my failures drew people in. Someone messaged me privately, "Charlotte, watching your streams makes me feel less alone. Thank you for daring to be real." Those simple words were worth more to me than every fake. "We're proud of you," my family had ever said. Strangely, when I stopped craving recognition from my relatives, I started being respected more. By complete strangers. I poured my time and heart into projects interspersed with regular streams. The small studio apartment slowly transformed into my creative space. Every corner reflected the real Charlotte, modest, intentional, but filled with hard work. Some nights in the quiet, I'd ask myself, I used to think happiness meant having a family who acknowledged me. Maybe peace comes from walking away from the wrong expectation, a simple truth that took me 24 years to accept. I was never truly alone. I had just mistaken being related for being on my side. A month after moving out, I received an invitation to speak at a content creation workshop for young female streamers. The invitation came from Mia Reynolds, a veteran streamer who had overcome a toxic family background just like me. She said she had been following my channel and wanted me to share my story not about family drama, but about the journey of rebuilding oneself from zero. I hesitated. Standing in front of people talking about myself and old wounds was never easy. But then I realized this wasn't Charlotte's sad story anymore. It was a real experience proof that we can build a good life without sacrificing our self-respect. At the workshop, I stood on a small stage. The spotlight wasn't blinding, but the eyes of the young audience below shone with a strange brightness. I talked about my first PC, the countless hours of work just to buy one component, and the moment I realized I didn't need to prove my worth to people who had already chosen to deny it. I didn't sugarcoat anything. I didn't paint myself as a victim. I simply said slowly that everyone has the right to define their own limits. When I finished, the room applauded, not loudly, but sincerely. Mia walked up, took my hand, and whispered, "I know when you sent that message, I'm not coming back." It felt like you were pulling all the air out of your lungs, but you see now you're breathing deeper than ever. I smiled. It was true. They were no longer the center of my universe. Now, every day I wake up, I know exactly what I'm living for, who I'm working for. Not to please someone else's inflated ego, but to stay true to my own values. No more expectations, only choices. And I chose myself. That fall, I stopped counting the calls from my family. I no longer dreamed of a day when Mom would apologize or Dad would finally see me as an adult. Lauren stayed the same glamorous on social media, flaunting things I knew were bought on mounting debts. But the difference was, this time, I felt nothing. No jealousy, no frustration. Simply, it was no longer my concern. I wasn't wildly successful by their standards. I wasn't rich, not famous, but I had a small, cozy apartment, a job that allowed me to live decently, and a small community that genuinely appreciated what I created. I even planted a few pots by my window, something I once thought I didn't have time for. Every morning, I'd brew a cup of coffee, start my work, and by evening, chat with a few friends in the industry. A simple life, but for the first time, I truly felt what peace meant. One day, while cleaning out old emails, I stumbled upon the very first message I had ever sent to a freelance client. It was filled with hesitation, lacking confidence, meticulously overdone to the point of being almost naive. I laughed. That version of Charlotte could never have imagined living this kind of free life. And in that moment, I realized I had never been discarded by my family. They simply never knew how to love me the right way. But it was me all these years who had handed over my own value to them. Walking away, cutting ties, it wasn't rebellion. It was the first act of learning to protect myself. That's all. No hatred, no need for forgiveness, just the understanding that everyone has their own way of living. That afternoon, I sat in my sunlit room and opened an unannounced live stream. No script, no elaborate prep. I just wanted to turn on the camera and share with the people who had quietly walked this journey with me. I talked about the first time I dared to say no, about the feeling of putting an end to false expectations, and about the journey of learning to respect myself. No applause, no roaring cheers, but the comments poured in. You made me feel braver. Thank you for not sugarcoating the pain, but simply living honestly. That's right. Freedom isn't the absence of hurt, but no longer letting it control you. I smiled. Turns out, the most precious thing I gained from all those struggles wasn't recognition. It wasn't victory. It was the feeling of living a life that is truly mine. Calm, fulfilling, and free. Charlotte's story isn't a family tragedy. It's the journey of someone brave enough to escape the spiral of imposed expectations. Amidst all the for the family pressures, Charlotte chose to protect her own worth and live true to her passion and real abilities. In real life, many people are still trapped in that invisible cage. But this story reminds us freedom isn't rebellion. It's when we dare to set boundaries and walk our own path. What do you think of Charlotte's choice? Is walking away from a toxic family selfish? Or is it a way to protect yourself? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more meaningful stories about family and life.